So, Larry, how are we doing for numbers? Shall we make
I
a
think kick
start?
off. Yeah.
All right, great. Okay, thanks everyone for attending today. It's much appreciated. I've got a great lineup of speakers here to talk about plastics in some of that in a wide sense, and then some of it more related to the built environment and construction. Those that know us, we do these summits every year on plastics, and I'll talk a bit about what we've been doing on plastics as ASBP in a minute. So we're running from now till 2 o'clock. So a bit of housekeeping for you. Please do ask questions. That's really welcome. But we would ask you to use the Q&A panel, not the chat, to do that. There's also a function to upvote. We may not get time to answer every question, depending on how many we get. So the ones that you really want an answer to, please upvote. We are recording the session. We will share that recording with everyone, and it will be available on our YouTube channel next week. We'll put a link to that in the chat later. If you have any technical issues, don't message me because I'm rubbish at that sort of thing. Message my colleague Larry. He's in the back room, so to speak, in the chat panel, and he'll help where he can. Just back on the questions as well. If you don't want to put your name to your question, you can send anonymously. We may invite you to ask your question directly by putting your camera and mic on, but we'll see how that goes, and we'll see how much time we have. So today's webinar, this is part of our Reducing Plastics in Construction group. We've had this group for quite a while now and done various things, which I'll mention in a minute. Most of the work we haven't done to date has focused on health and the environmental impacts. We've probably looked at it more from a waste and a resource and packaging point of view. So it's really good today as part of the group to have the health and environmental impact looked at, in particular to plastics. We do have our wider Healthy Buildings conference every year, which obviously does look at health in quite a bit of detail, but not always related to plastics. Yes, so we're looking at, what are the concerns with the use of our plastics? We're ever using more of them. We'll share the latest thinking in terms of some of the research, what industry is doing, evidence, what can we do, what action should we all be taking in terms of the opportunities going forward. And this is part of Plastics Free July. If you want to look at their website, they have lots of different events and activities on there. So do please go and have a look, and we'll put a link in the chat in a minute to that. So this is our speakers. I let them introduce themselves when they speak, but you can see we've got a real good range of people from so research, evidence-based people through to manufacturers, consultants. So a real good sort of breadth and depth of knowledge and experience and activities. This is our agenda. So obviously I'm speaking at the moment. We have Charlotte next from Earth Action. They've done a lot of work on footprinting, and there's a paint connection there. So that'll be really interesting to hear about. We've got a 12-minute fast track, although Sean, you have got 15 minutes, so I'll be a bit more generous with that if you want. That's a bit more of a wider look at plastics. They've got a new campaign, very much about babies, so that's going to be really interesting. We have Joanne and Ben. They've been working on some guidance with CIRIA funding to look at microplastics and the reduction of that in construction. Probably the first guide to be written in construction on that. So a real good thing to hear about. We have Michiel. He's from our paints and finishes group at ASBP and also represents the manufacturing side. So what are they doing to try and limit plastics use there? And last but not least, I have my colleague Larry, and he'll tell you all about the bit of work we've been doing as part of the plastics group, which we're launching today. So just a quick overview of ASBP. Hopefully most of you have heard about us and know about us. Please do scan the QR code if you want to know more. We're not for profit, a mission-led organisation. We're very much about the transition of using products to have a healthy, low carbon built environment. We do lots of different things, lots of activities. We have different groups. We have events like today, having a bit of a break from events of August, but you'll see if you go onto our website, we do have a very much full program of events throughout the year. We develop best practice guidance. We collaborate a lot across the value chain. That's really important. Work with government on consultations, policy, and then have different groups focusing on different areas. And obviously, this is part of our plastic group. Please do join if you're not a member. It is really good value, and we really are very friendly and love to work with our members. So this has been going 7 years. Who can believe it? Our Reducing Plastics in Construction group. It's a cross-sector group. And we've done various things with it. We've looked at introductory guides. We've had competitions a while back now, looking at people pitching products which don't use plastic or use considerably less plastic. We have an interactive house which came out of the plastic work, which was very much looking at what members' products there are and if they've got EPDs in a very sort of user-friendly format. Case studies, webinars as today, a very substantial toolkit on packaging called ZAP. That's still very relevant. And then our new work to date, which Larry will go through, is this evidence study we've done looking at plastics in construction and sort of the health risks related to that. As I said, we do have a schedule of events. So these are our next two big ones, if you like. We have our Natural Materials Summit on the 21st of October. That's in Swindon at I don't know what NSBRC stands for. Apologies. I'm not even going to attempt. But if you're into natural materials, there'll be lots of demos and talks and sort of quite practical in some senses. So come along to that. And this is also another big event we're doing. We're very active in the world of circular economy and reuse. And this is very much looking at how we can build resilience through reuse by looking at reuse products and all the different enablers. And we're using the tagline, I think it's bring a buddy. So we're trying to want to get out of the usual, echo chamber and get our message out wider. And then soon to be agreed these dates for reuse of doors, steel reuse and biogenic carbon. Could spend all day talking about biogenic carbon, but we've only got an hour. So these are a couple members of our group for plastics. We have Muller Europe. They do a lot of copper products, mainly piping. They work with a company called CUSP. They have campaigns related to that, as you can see there, which is trying to sort of, make copper preferential over plastic. And we also have Protec. They've been a member for us quite a while. Received the King's Award Enterprise. They are a plastic product, but they reuse and remanufacture where they can. So that's we also look at that within our sphere. Right, so that's enough of me. So I'm going to welcome Charlotte to put on her camera and mic and start sharing her slides. So over to you, Charlotte. You've got 15 minutes. I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, I think I'm sharing my screen. Is this all right?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. So it's a pleasure to be here today for this exchange. I'll briefly introduce myself. So I'm Charlotte. I'm working on the topic of plastic pollution. I have been doing so for about 3 years now since I joined EA. My background is actually in sustainable business and innovation with a focus on environmental footprint and impact assessment. Um, and so I also focus on corporate accountability mechanisms to make the transition from science to impact. I'm working as a consultant at Earth Action, which is it's a mission-driven research consultancy, and we've been producing independent research on plastic pollution since 2017. And today I'm also wearing my Plastic Footprint Network hat as the Secretariat co-lead. So a little bit about the work we do at EA. We've been at the forefront of footprint development. We first launched the plastics platform in 2021. It's publicly available data about packaging end of life. It's available at the polymer and country level. And we also launched the Plastic Footprint Network a little bit later in 2023, which I'll tell you more about in a minute. Along with that, in 2023, so using that database that we built, we launched the Plastic Overshoot Day, which works in a similar fashion to the Earth Overshoot Day. So basically indicates the global date, which currently sits at somewhere in mid-September, according to the latest estimates, where waste actually starts to become mismanaged as a result of overshooting our collective global waste management capacity. We have about 16 reference landmark reports on our website, one of which is when we first started publishing about plastic footprinting back in 2018. And that was then published in the Marine Plastic Footprint with IUCN as well. Now, a bit more about the Plastic Footprint Network. It was founded by EA as a multi-stakeholder body involving scientists, practitioners, and industry. The purpose of this network is really to unify the methodologies and perspective of leading scientists, experts, and global practitioners. So as to use a standardized methodology for plastic footprinting. And our mission is to enable organizations to understand the full impact or the footprint from the use of plastic in their products across to their operations. So today we have about 16 modules publicly available on our website. It covers strategic to technical insights, ranging from macroplastic to microplastics in different applications. So go have a look at that if that sounds interesting. But today I'll be focusing a little bit more on the construction sector. But first, like, setting the scene and looking at the global trends, plastic production only keeps increasing. We're producing about 460 million tons, and those numbers date back to 2019. It's projected to triple by 2060, according to OECD numbers. And we also know that only about 9% of this plastic waste is actually recycled today. So looking at the building sector, it's actually a large contributor behind packaging, which is the largest contributor. But construction and building contributes about 19% in terms of plastic pollution. Also, when talking about plastics, we have to mention the health impacts, though I won't go into too much detail here because I'm sure other experts will fill you in on this with much more precision. But basically, we know today that we find microplastics in most organs of the body. It's popping up in the news, in new scientific articles almost every day, and we're starting to understand these impacts a little bit better, though the health consequences are not yet well known and well understood. What we know, though, is that we are exposed to chemicals in plastic through our daily lives, and this exposure is linked to a wide range of health impacts. We also know that none of the plastic chemicals examined in that particular umbrella review, at least, could be considered safe. And actually, a lot of substances on the market are unregulated, so we cannot consider them safe with absolute certainty. And this study in particular only examines a tiny fraction of the thousands of substances used in plastic. About quantifying leakage. So what we are here to help with is actually to quantify leakage and producing an inventory of plastics that are used and found in different applications, and how much and where they end up in the environment. Because quantifying leakage is key in order to go to the next step, to be able to measure impact. And then from leakage quantification, impact assessment can be conducted, translating into environmental and health impact, and then allowing for targeted reduction where impact should be reduced and can be reduced the most. Now I will go a little bit more into detail about the paint report, Plastic Paints the Environment, that we published in 2022. This is a sectoral report focusing on paint leakage. And at the time, we didn't really hear about paint as part of the conversation on plastic pollution. So what this report uncovered is that paint is actually a massive source of microplastics leakage. And I want to preface this by saying that the intention of this research is not to criticize paint in and of itself. Paint is actually needed in many ways. It protects surfaces, it can extend the life of infrastructure and deliver real environmental value. But the goal of this report was also to increase awareness on an overlooked problem and to pave the way towards better management of this paint system. So to do that, this report set out to answer 4 questions. The first one being, what is the total contribution of paint to plastic leakage? Which sectors contribute the most, and where geographically is leakage most severe? And also which loss mechanisms matter most? So of the 18.6 million tons of plastic that enters the market in paint annually, 40% leaks. That's about 7.4 million tons every year reaching the environment. That leakage splits 2 ways by type. 63% is microplastics and 37% is macroplastics. And this leakage is happening through 5 loss mechanisms identified, through application, removal, wear and tear, paint that's unused, and paint at end of life when it's discarded. So the leakage reaches the environment by 2 fates, and that's 63% reaching land and 37% reaching oceans and waterways. But another area that we're also working on is on microplastics at the global scale. So we regularly publish a microplastic barometer of all microplastic sources. Here we're looking at paint, but we're also looking at textiles, synthetic fibers, personal care products, tires, and plastic pellets. So here in the numbers dating back to 2023, you can see that out of the 3.8 million tons and 8.9 million tons of plastic going to the ocean and to land, respectively, paint accounts for about 49% of ocean emissions and 32% of land emissions. So paint is a large source of microplastic pollution, accounting together with pellets and tires for more than 99% of microplastic leakage globally. And a little bit about our theory of change at Earth Action, but within the PFN mostly through the work that we do. That shows that a scientific breakthrough can result in a change of regulations. With the paints report that was published in 2020, it made the methodology publicly available, and it allowed to turn it into a corporate standard, enabling companies and product manufacturers to measure and disclose in alignment with other reporting standards. So the result of this report enabled to engage with the European Commission and to put this important topic on the agenda. And eventually, this engagement resulted into the update of the EU REACH Annex number 17, now in force since May of this year. And as a result, paint and coatings manufacturers must label products with microplastic warnings and report their emissions from tool washing. And some more information about the modules currently in development in the Plastic Footprint Network on paint and construction. We're developing 2 new technical modules that extend our library into additional material streams with more granularity this time. The first is the paint microplastics, which builds on the report Plastic Paints the Environment that I've just presented. It's going to be mapping plastic footprint and leakage sector by sector, starting with marine coatings. And the second one is construction plastic pollution. This one is a whole life cycle framework covering the buildings sector at large, so including plastic and microplastic flows across pre-use, in-service, and end of life. And so we are doing this work because we need that granularity to pilot the adequate change, and we need to understand these streams with much more granularity. So if this resonates with your current production or the work that you're doing in your research, and if this is of interest, we would be thrilled to collaborate and happy to give you more information if you want to reach out. So thank you very much. I'm looking forward to any questions in the Q&A portion of this meeting. And now I'm going to hand over to Katherine. I think I did quite well on time and giving a few extra minutes of leeway.
Oh, thank you, Charlotte. Super interesting there. I've got some questions for you, but I'll leave it to the end. I'm not speaking on behalf of ASBP. We would very much like to support you in those modules you're developing. And it links to some of the stuff we've been doing as well. So, right. Can I just give a reminder to people to put their questions in the Q&A, please? I'm sure there will be a few for Charlotte. So next up, we've got Sian, who's going to be talking a bit wider than just construction, but something very important. So Sian, over to you.
Brilliant. Hold on one second. There we go. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody is well. Thank you, Charlotte. I found that absolutely fascinating. Continue to share. Is that working for everybody?
Yeah, we can see
Brilliant.
it. Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, let me rock in because as ever, I have a lot of slides and a lot of words and a few minutes. So I'm going to dive straight in. Really, really, it's such a pleasure to be here and be given this opportunity to speak to everybody. Very passionate about the second biggest use of plastic that Charlotte so well covered already. But I'm going to talk to you about something that perhaps touches you not just in your business world and your professions, but touches you more at that human level. So we exist for the last 10 years for this one specific reason. We work with industry and governments to ignite and inspire the world to turn off the plastic tap. So we are nothing to do with recycling, with the BS of recycling. That Charlotte again has covered already, that chimera that we think is actually going to fix this when it's not. We are all about the tap. So beach cleans, all of those things. God bless those people that go to the beach to clean it. When did that ever happen? We're much more interested in turning the tap off its source. Some of the work that we do over the last 10 years, we come from the world of business. So we operate in a slightly different way to a charity or an NGO, where we are entirely business, policy, and solution focused. We built the world's first solutions platform, which is hosted on plasticfree.com. That is built really for people like everybody listening today. What are the materials of the future? And in fact, what is available today viably at scale? To prove that and make that this physical manifestation, we also build Plastic Freeland. So for example, in New York Climate Week last week at the NYU Plastics, Health and Solutions Symposium, we built Plastic Freeland. That's a tiny glimpse of it in that picture in the middle there. But also at places like Change Now, where you've got 40,000 people in the Grand Palais in Paris. So this is a way of proving that living and having the lives that we love, that we think only plastic can give us, is again, not a truth. And here are plastic-free sneakers, plastic-free clothing, packaging, of course, with so many different uses of natural materials that fit into nature's circular economy that are available today. And then we do a lot on global advocacy, which is largely focused around health. So I live in a world where often there is pushback of, well, carbon is the metric for industry right now. So let's fix plastic down the road because we've really got to focus on carbon. So I'd like to first give you this provocation of why 10 years in as an entrepreneur, I am still obsessed by plastic. It's because I see it as a gateway. I see it as a gateway to the entire polycrisis. And I could go through every one of those little circles and talk about inequality and the fact that we still export from the UK 60% of our plastic waste, often to countries that have no decent waste infrastructure of their own. I can talk about hyperconsumption, about the fact that the invention of this amazing material changed the system of us thinking that we can use something once and then put it in an imaginary bin. This whole single-use culture really comes from the invention of plastic. The fact that we use over 1.7 planets worth of resource every single year. This way of thinking, the single-use culture, the hyper-consumptive society model that we have today that we think is normal, has been turbocharged by the invention of this extraordinary material. I don't need to go into conflict where there is oil, which is obviously plastic. There is always conflict, or even the climate crisis. The plastics industry is, as a country, the 5th biggest emitter of greenhouse gas emissions. And often you will hear, yeah, but plastic is light, therefore it's light in carbon. But we are never looking at a true LCA for plastic. But today what I'm really going to focus on is the Achilles heel of big plastic, big oil, and that is the impact on health. I mean, the scale of the problem is not reducing in any way. Plastic is on track right now as the soft landing for the plastics industry, for the fossil fuel industry. It is on track to treble by mid-century. These numbers are pretty terrifying, and this is what we're pumping out every single hour. Little plastic sachets alone go 6 times to the moon and back. The amount of plastic bottles that we pump out just for water, not even Coca-Cola, is 600 billion every single year. It goes halfway to the sun. So as we know, unless it's been burned, every piece of plastic, be it in construction, packaging or clothing, still exists on the planet today. So nothing is slowing down. If I look at our KPIs as a plastic planet, if less plastic in the world is my KPI, we have failed. which is why we are looking this year to do things in a very different way. And I think if we look at global politics, one of the things that has been interesting is to see, certainly with the Trump form of communication, sometimes a different comms style can work. It may not give us the long-term future and the political environment that we want. But I look at the climate comms scenario as one of the biggest failures in human communications ever. Look where we are today, despite the billions that have been spent. So we have to think about doing things in a different way. Recycling, of course, we've tried. For decades, we've swallowed that placebo pill, thinking that we can simply recycle our way out of the problem. We've tried treaties, and the Global Plastic Treaty, again, Charlotte has already talked about that, and I personally attended many of those negotiations, bringing health scientists to the treaty process to try and ensure that the negotiating members really heard about the true impact on human health and that would be considered. And the good news is, even though we don't have a UN Global Plastics Treaty yet, the good news is, number one, we don't have a bad one, we don't have a weak one, but also human health 3 years ago at the beginning of the treaty process was barely considered and now is one of the central issues. So the health science has really had some impact. We tried trusting industry. We've listened to industry and said, great, you're going to self-regulate out of this. But it is impossible for most industries, be it consumer goods, probably building products and the building industry, and definitely the fashion industry. It is impossible for a CEO in today's political environment to be the one that takes that plunge, tells their shareholders, we're going to take a short-term hit in order for it to have a long-term success and make sure we're not a future dinosaur. No CEO is capable of doing that. So we know that trusting industry isn't going to work. So what we've been looking at a Plastic Planet is, so what is it going to take if none of these things that we've explored before are going to turn the tide and catalyze the level of change that we need in a world that is so entirely dependent on fossil fuel plastic? We don't see it as a waste crisis or a pollution crisis. We don't see it as something where we should be looking at that end of the pipe. We see it so much more as this is an industry problem, it's a government problem, and the pollution that we should be caring about is the pollution that's inside us. This gives you a little snapshot of some of the chemicals that we use in the manufacture of plastic, be it paint on the walls, be it something that we use within construction, or the clothing that we wear, the polyester clothing, which makes 70% of all textiles globally now, or the plastic packaging and the products that we see. And what's extraordinary is that so much of plastic and the chemicals within plastic has escaped global regulation, this omnipresent material in our lives. We know that 16,000 plus chemicals are used in the manufacture of plastic. And we also know that less than 4,000 of them have ever been tested for the impact on human health. And most of them are considered toxic for humans and are on the European Register for Chemicals of Extreme Concern. So we believe that human health and the impact on human health through the treaty process, through industry, through us proving risk to governments and industry is that defibrillator, that badoof that we finally need to wake everybody up. There are 2 documentaries that some of you may have seen. One is on Netflix now, and it's The Plastic Detox. And it's one of our scientists, Dr. Shanna Swan, going into the homes of 6 couples who cannot conceive. And there is no medical reason why they're not conceiving. And for once, it is a plastic documentary that has good news at the end of it, because she goes into their homes. She does some really quite simple, quite basic. She's not changing the paint on the walls. She's not even going into their wardrobes. And the results are quite extraordinary of enabling you to feel that we have a bit more power over the impact of these toxic endocrine disrupting chemicals than perhaps we previously thought. And the good news at the end is there is the pitter-patter of tiny feet. But I won't give you any more spoilers. But I think that is a really interesting documentary that tells the story of the impact of plastic, but also the control that we have over it in a different way. The other one is a documentary called Infertile. And this, I went to the launch of this last Wednesday in London. And this one, I think you can just see, if you Google it, you can now see it online because they're not yet with a streaming partner. But it really explores infertility, particularly male infertility. And in some of my slide decks, I talk about the decline, the 53% decline in male sperm count. And I need to refresh my decks because that number is now over 60% decline in male sperm count. And the endocrine disruption that the scientists believe is at the foot of that. But even if we do manage to conceive a baby, and even if we do manage to grow a baby in utero full term, increasingly rare now, our babies are born pre-polluted and they're born into this entire world of plastic, from the paint on the walls and from the crib to the changing mat, of course, to the plastic feeding bottle, of course, to things like pacifiers, to the little scrunchy toy, the little, jelly cat that every newborn baby, it seems, is now given. Every single thing in their life is now made of plastic. So this year in the House of Lords, 3 weeks ago, actually, we convened what we termed a national emergency briefing for babies. And this wasn't Sian with a jazz hand saying, here's our latest campaign this year. No, this was 6 doctors and scientists saying in the House of Lords to policymakers, to media, to other doctors and scientists, definitely to industry, we have a national emergency. Our babies are in crisis, and plastic and the chemicals within plastic are impacting them in utero, but also when they're born, because this first 1,000 days of life are of paramount importance. We know that these are the chemicals already found, 287 chemicals in fetal cord blood. We know that babies are born with plastics already in their brains, and we have to think of plastic as a concoction of chemicals. It's not a material in its own right. We know that even in breast milk, so you would imagine that the safest thing, the most healthy thing that you can do as a new mum is breastfeed your baby. And of course, you're right. But how terrible that we are now actually offloading the chemical toxic burden of a new mum into babies. Those first 1,000 days of life are absolutely paramount importance. From the moment of conception until 2 years old, your entire health as a future human is dictated in those first 1,000 days. Your propensity for cancer, for autoimmune disease, for autism, for many of the things that we're seeing now, even, obesity. These endocrine disrupting chemicals are obesogens. So there is so many human conditions and frailties that we are seeing right now that we can lay at the foot of disruption in those first 1,000 days. So we hope that our campaign, which launches in the UK, which is very focused on working with the healthcare industry, how do we take the billions of plastic feeding bottles out of the NHS? We're working with the Portland Hospital. We're even looking at what is the environment in their new neonatal unit that they're building? What's the physical environment of the building there? I was up yesterday at Alderhay, the largest children's hospital in Europe, and looking at what they're doing and the toxic environment in their neonatal unit. So we hope that this twin track approach of looking at the healthcare environment of the maternity and the new baby wards, but also looking at the products that we sell, not just the packaging. But I did an entire little review of a regular baby aisle in Boots. And it was horrifying to see that you could buy in this wall of plastic packaging and plastic products, you could buy a 70-pound electric nail buffer for a newborn. Why is that even needed? And you could only buy 1 glass bottle. And even that had a plastic teat, not a medical grade silicone teat. So we hope that this campaign that starts in the UK will be very soon rolling out into New York and DC, so covering the US, and also the EU, that it will be the beginning of a very necessary end, because it is difficult for us to politicize babies. We may not care about turtles with straws up their nose, but we definitely care about our babies. We have published a roadmap, and that roadmap really shows what policy is needed. We have developed a microsite, which you can see on plasticfreebabies.world. It's a very, very simple call to action, which is for concerned new parents, for the people on this call, I hope, to simply write to their MP to demand that we have this very clear ask answered. We have to treat the first 1,000 days as a critical endocrine disrupting chemical exposure window because it matters so much. And we need an urgent call for evidence. This is a public inquiry. And this is simply not to attack industry. I believe in the power of industry to be part of the change, but it is to unite the known science on endocrine disrupting chemicals, because we do not need more research in this. This is not nascent like microplastic research. There is decades of research about endocrine disrupting chemicals' impact on human health. We need to unite that with the expertise within industry to bring safe and affordable plastic-free alternatives to babies. We need to stop thinking that plastic is a material. It is so much more than simply materials. When we're looking at the change that we need, it's not simply a material swap. I want to go back to this thinking of it is a gateway to the entire poly crisis, because the good news is that much as it's a gateway in to the poly crisis, the change, the systemic, the endemic change that we will see, it will also be an extraordinary gateway out. So my plea to all of you is that when we work together and when we address it in this complete systemic, holistic way, change when we work together can happen really fast. Thank you.
Thanks, Sian. Wow. I don't know what to say to that, really. Very, your passion shines through. Very engaging. Lots to think about there. Yeah, I'm sure people will have questions. I've got a few or a few thoughts. Probably need a little bit of time to digest that. But please, everyone, do write your comments or yeah, questions in the Q&A. And thanks again. And well done for keeping up your passion. Did you say you're 10 years into this?
10 years in, we've only just begun. Come on,
Oh, good for you. Good for
but
you.
I feel Plastic Free Babies is going to be the one.
Yeah,
Because
and I
it
think you
really
may
is
be
the
right.
undeveloped. Yeah,
Yeah, I can see the yes. Being a mum myself, I can see that. Yeah.
great.
Thank you, Sian.
Thank
I'm
you.
sure there'll be questions for you. Right. Next is Ben. Is Joanne presenting as well, or is it just Ben? I'm not.
I'll be mainly presenting. Joanne, feel free to chime in if I
Yeah,
miss anything
that's
or
right.
see
I hope
anything.
you don't mind.
Yeah, no.
Oh, great.
A
Okay.
backseat driver in some respect. So you got two of us.
That's fine. Ben, if you want to share your slides, that would be great. Joanne, do you want to give yourself a quick intro whilst Ben's
Yeah,
sharing his slides?
sure. For those who don't know CIRIA is a good practice guidance provider for the construction industry. And we're almost 70 years old now, and we have published a lots of good practice guidance, good practice guidance document for all sort of issues. And the one that Ben is going to tell a little bit more is a recent project that Ben and Ramboll is working on. Is about helping construction industry to manage microplastic a little better. If you don't know already, construction industry is the second biggest user of plastic. At the moment, all microplastic come from plastic, the current type of plastic at least. So I think, as an industry, we have responsibility to make sure that we're not damaging the environment more, and obviously act more responsibly and more sustainably. So anyway, so over to Ben to tell a little bit about what we found out.
Thanks, Joanne. So yeah, my name is Ben Stride. So I'm an environmental consultant with Ramboll. I specialize in emerging contaminants and specifically microplastics. I did my doctoral thesis on the transport and fate of microplastics in the environment. So it's kind of also a bit of a passion of mine. But here specifically, yeah, we'll be presenting on the first set of guidance for managing microplastics in construction projects in the UK. As you can see in the back of this picture here, this is actually from a plastic recycling facility. This is all shredded plastic in the back that we found on one of our site visits, just for your own information. So just as a kind of intro, as Joanne has already said, the construction industry is the second largest consumer of plastics in the UK. So you can hear is a rough estimation of around 23% by the British Plastics Federation in 2018. And currently, the amount of guidance on the risk assessment and management of microplastics is very limited globally. We actually only found one other guidance document, but provided by the ITRC in the US, that really does provide like kind of more of an in-depth guidance on microplastics. So this would be, as we just previously said, the first of its kind in the UK, making it hopefully quite a landmark document for microplastic management. So when undergoing the literature review for this guidance document, ended up having to try and find an easy way to navigate it because we ended up with a lot more information than the guidance document, well, section of the document itself. So we could obviously argue about which line goes to what on this navigation roadmap, but the main point is that we had to develop this to try and direct certain people to certain parts without having to just throw the whole 130-page document at them. The general structure of the document is that it's split into an introduction and then three parts. Part one is plastics in the construction industry. Part two is the environmental and human health impacts. And then part three is the guidance itself. So I won't go too much into the definition of microplastics and all that, but what we will say is that for this guidance document, microplastics were considered to be between 1 micron and 5 millimeters in diameter as the size. This is because the lower size limit, especially for microplastics, is still up for debate depending on what research you're using it, whether it's an organizational governing body or you're talking about toxic research or transport and fate research and so forth. So, I think we've heard from a lot of people already basically saying why microplastics matter. But as a real quick summary, the production is increasing on a year-on-year basis, as you can see in this figure. They are wildly distributed and very persistent, and they contain a variety of additives, and they also have a potential for transporting other contaminants and then therefore also a combined toxicity with other contaminants. From a legal context, a significant proportion of microplastic legislation actually does originate from the EU, who are kind of taking the lead on this. In recent years, the UK has made more commitments to align closer with the EU, especially for emerging contaminants such as PFAS, leading to it being likely doing the same for microplastics in the future. So as we got part one here of the document, we just have some general figures here of the total production demand for each polymer. As you can see, actually around 50% of the total plastic polymers produced is actually, I think it's about 45% is mainly polyethylene and polypropylene. So luckily there's two polymers from a transport and freight and a chemical additives perspective that are actually making up the bulk of plastics and are quite often what I've found in the latest research studies when you're trying to calculate, take samples and so forth. As you can see, the diagram here is also repeated in the first slide, so that's 23% roughly there, saying from the construction industry, and then you have all the disposal methods talked about here. I'm not going to talk about too much depth on these slides because I am going to try and get to the guidance document itself. But the guidance document itself, mainly we talk about, we had to do some literature review into different materials. The main materials that we found information on or are generally considered to have larger microplastic releases were concrete, floor coverings, membranes, sheetings, packaging, paints, and tires and road wear particles as well. Other materials we also had to look at, insulation, adhesive sealants, pipes, gutters, ceiling panels, cables, plastic beads, and wall linings, which we did provide some information for as well. This is more visualized in the figure on the left here as well for anyone looking. And then we also had to look at these case studies here. So this part two, this slide is mainly just showing how complex it is to try and model the transport and fate of microplastics. There's so many parameters at play. This was from a slide I did from a presentation on looking at the transport and fate of microplastics in groundwater. And then you have here all the blue different parameters are the particle properties of the microplastics that you have to take into account, and then all the green ones, the hydrogeological properties and processes that you also have to take into account. But generally, as a general consideration, smaller, lighter, and more fibrous plastics tend to be more transportable. When you look at more of an ecological and human health impact, essentially, the main factors from a microplastic perspective are, its particle size, the shape, the polymer type, exposure duration, and the presence of co-contaminants. And then the main exposure routes are, via inhalation or oral ingestion as well. So the main thing here is that essentially and this is the case for a lot of emerging contaminants and the toxicity of them, is that chronic, long-term effects and multi-generational effects are generally understudied and not really understood, as well as acute toxic effects, which is not where microplastics have their biggest impact, because generally microplastics are considering from the impact, and when you take into account their additives, the total exposure, the amount of that is out there that we've already just talked about, it's more of the chronic long-term effects that we may see from them in the future. So from the guidance itself, we basically start with outlining the overall methodology that underpins the guidance. We then follow that with specific guidance on how construction projects can identify, document, control, minimize microplastic risks during different construction phases. So in this time, we split it into pre, during, and post-construction. And here you have a plastic procurement sheet that we use as an example to try and identify, record, and track the use of plastics in construction projects. And this then morphs into the next step, where we go into risk characterization. So once we know that a plastic has to be used, we then try and manage it from a more of a risk perspective and rank it. So the risk rating was essentially ranked by, to try and keep it simple, a low, moderate, or high risk. And this was basically done on the potential for environmental release and the presence of harmful additives. In relation to environmental release, as I've already just previously said, these are considered to be, fibrous foams or primary microplastics are considered to have a higher release potential. And then harmful additives, if they have a high additive content greater than 20% of the plastic, such as many PVC in a lot of cases, then these are also considered to have a higher risk. And this resulted in the table on the next slide that I'm going to show you, but basically the polymers that aren't on the table on the next slide, this figure, this flow chart, essentially summarizes the processes that you follow to give how we got to our conclusion, and you can use this process for any polymers that aren't in that table. So here's the table that we created. As you can see here, we have the main polymer types that are used in construction on the left. We have the example construction investigation uses here in both of in the next column, and then the potential for microplastic release ranking here, and then the additive concern rating here, and then you've got the reasonings here as well. This results in overall risk rating. If the risk is deemed high, then more research is needed and alternative products should be researched. But essentially, this rating uses if it takes the higher of the two available. So if you have a low and a moderate, it takes the moderate as the overall risk rating. So then you go into part 3, which is the risk management. This looks into more of capture technologies, simple management strategies that should be basic part of construction products, but sometimes are left out, such as having a dedicated plastic work area to just minimize microplastic releases. But the main thing obviously is integrating both is likely to be the most effective, but management and capturing technologies are constantly evolving, and this is going to have to be probably updated or taken into account in future projects. And then you have a general, plastic waste management flow diagram here. I'm sure a lot of you are generally aware of this for materials also beyond plastic, but it's also good to have it all in the same guidance document. In other words, prioritizing reuse. Then if you can't reuse it, then recycling is preferred, and then you can go into repurposing, and then chemical recycling, incineration. If none of those work for your plastic, you can dispose of as a landfill as a last resort. So in summary, we have by our construction phase, pre-construction, we want to reduce the use of high-risk plastics where plastic is required. And then we're also trying to just raise the awareness and the potential impact of different forms of plastics. During construction, having dedicated storage and washing areas, containment systems, good plastic waste management, and more training for workers is key. And then for post-construction, good waste management schemes and schedules in place for the operational maintenance of filter technologies and others like suds and other things that will capture microplastics beyond when the simple construction is taking place. And then obviously road and vehicle maintenance as well, especially with the amount of microplastics potentially released from tires and roads and so forth. So in conclusion, we have what we found from our guidance document is that there is large data gaps that we found, and there's a lack of, especially for quantitative data of microplastic releases. There's a general lack of standardization, and there is the transport and fate of microplastics is very complex. Saying knowledge gaps again in human health and ecological sphere as well, material specific knowledge gaps, especially what's actually contained within some of these materials. It doesn't have to necessarily be stated, and then obviously the regulatory uncertainty, which hopefully will be changing in the next few years and as more information comes to light. And then, some of the main recommendations we can to go forward, reduce microplastics at the source, improve the procurement, material tracking, strengthen the waste handling, more monitoring, regulation and accountability for microplastic releases, and then also investing in technology and innovation and research priorities. But the main statement, we're just trying to get towards microplastics is kind of change the overall perception of plastics used in construction from more of a material functionality, but towards, a more of an environmental risk that they can pose as well, and general stewardship. Okay, thank you very much. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Ben, and thanks, Joanne. It's great that CIRIA commissioned this bit of work. I've got a quick question. I don't know if you said this, apologies if I missed it. When will the guidance be?
Yes. Yeah, that's kind of a key
available?
bit. I probably should have said at the end. Yeah, so it's going to be hopefully released later this year. We're literally in the progress of just reviewing the final draft, so there shouldn't be too many barriers in the way of it being released late in the next few months.
Okay, and that will be available on the CIRIA website.
Yes. I think we do a lot of promotion when it comes out, so I don't think you will not know it when it comes out. Yeah, I would say
Great. Look forward to
it.
Great. Look forward to its release. I really like that table actually with the risk table. I think that's going to be a really, really useful tool. I'm
Thank
sure
you.
there's
Hopefully.
questions. Yeah. I'm sure there's questions for Ben and Joanne. So please do add them into the Q&A. So thanks again, Ben and Joanne. Really interesting. Nice to see some practical guidance in this area, definitely. So I'm going to hand over to Michiel now. If you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Well, that's a lot to take in. Some really interesting presentations. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm actually my background is in historic building preservation in the Netherlands, and basically having an awareness of what materials were used historically, and understanding the materials that were used in historic building architecture. Lo and behold, if they're pre-1945, they're also pre-plastic. So my opening slide, therefore, here is certainly not one to greenwash, show a nice plant and a bee. This is actually flax, right? So this is the source of one of the paints that was used for 2, 3, 4,000 years. This is what I want to talk to you about. So paint, the plastic that we forgot, because hardly anybody talks about paint as a big pollutant and a source of microplastics. This is why I really like the work that Earth Action have done, and Charlotte and her team are doing a great job on this. So if we can just look at this in a slightly broader context, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. But if you look at in the broader spectrum, where does like linseed paint sit? Because I'm not here to just talk about linseed paint. It's about paint in general. So historically, you have broadly two kind of groups of paints. You had your natural oil paints, of which the most of it was linseed oil based. Could be tung oil, a few different types, and they were literally mixtures with predominantly mineral pigments. They were tended to be used for wood and metal interior and exterior use. And then you had your actual water-based paints, so your natural water-based paints. Lime washes, casein paints, clay paints, silicates. Also predominantly mineral pigments, sometimes plant-based pigments, and they tend to be broadly used on stone, render, plaster, and brick. Now, if we compare that, we've kept the kind of terminology about paint, but these are, it's the same word, but it is a completely different material. Conventional modern paint is essentially a polymer the pigments shouldn't even really be called pigments. They tend to be synthetic colorants. You all know the image of getting like a base color tinted with a few drops of colorants. It's essentially the content of an average can of paint, an average tin of paint, is about 37% polymers. So it's liquid plastic. So when we now talk about and the mention of kind of modern water-based paints, it is just greenwashing. All it means is that you can add some water to the paint to thin it or to clean up your brushes, and cleaning up of the brushes washes the microplastics straight into our water table. So paint was so well understood, and it was such a basic material. So what you have, for instance, for linseed paint is literally oil, the linseed oil, and a pigment. And you can see here, this is actually an iron oxide red. Now, all you need to do is grind those two. And this is a very traditional way here with a muller and slab. Obviously, we can't do that to scale. And one of my big drives for the last 10, 15 years has been to try and make this paint available on a commercial scale again. So we do need to actually now use a triple roller mill, but even this technology is essentially Victorian. So all this does is mix those two ingredients. So you've got your linseed oil and your pigments. You grind, first you mix them, and then you grind them into the triple roller mill. Now, this has, from a building perspective, loads of advantages. It doesn't create wood rot because it has wicking capacities through diffusion. Loads of advantages, but the one that I really want to focus on today is obviously our health, not just the health of the building. It's for people living in a building, again, keeping an environment that is far less damp. So with breathable materials, you really help this environment in a certain case, but also the ingredients that we use and where they come from. Because a conventional plastic paint, it probably on average has about 35 ingredients coming in from all over the world. So the embodied energy is enormous. So what happens? Why are we now, when we think about paint, we think about the modern petrochemical version? It's essentially 1945, because even already in the late 1920s, 1930s, there's a lot of synthesizing going on of, basically coming up with synthesized versions of natural materials. But this wasn't available on a large scale. This is not possible until 1945, when all of a sudden, at the end of the Second World War, we're left with this huge waste mountain of polymers. And again, what is industry particularly good at is finding ways to make money out of a waste product. And that's what happens with the polymers. So our world turns plastic pretty much overnight. Also, one of the downsides of this is that paint will start to be seen as a decorative element. It's purely about the color, right? We all think about, certainly on a consumer level, it's all about, now I need to paint my room in the color of the season, or this year's fashionable color. And we start to move away from it being seen as a building product, and it really is a building product. It's a sacrificial coat. So. Yes, this is one of these things what I usually explain to people. People are amazed that this is actually, they're not really cognizant of the fact that a conventional paint is just a plastic coat that you wrap your house or your building in. It's what happens with these when we wrap these buildings and these properties in this plastic coating. Obviously, UV light, weather, and mechanical wear, abrasion. These all break down this paint over time. So this is kind of the difference between the micro and the macro leakage that the EA report is very good at distinguishing. This abrasion, this degradation of the film, because it's not repairable, it damages it irreversibly. So when this breaks down, it kind of all disappears into our water table. And this is really interesting, tying it in with the previous presentations, is that paint tends to be overlooked. We talk about membranes, insulation, sealants, pipes, packaging in a building setting. And I've seen this happen loads of times where even preservation specialists, they will specify a lime wash or lime render and then still specify a conventional plastic paint for wood and metal. So what I've been trying to do over time is make people and specifiers aware just how much conventional paint is contributing to the leakage of microplastics into our oceans. And I think Charlotte can probably correct me on this, but this is I think this has actually unfortunately gone up by now, but this is certainly a number from their original study, that 58% is caused by paint, and it's probably the least talked about. And it's not just about changing. What I want to do is make people aware of not trying to manipulate the conventional petrochemical paints to try and come up with slightly different versions, slightly better versions. We can basically skip that step and go back to what used to use historically, and we have a track record of millennia. With these historic building materials. And I think the blip in 100 years from now, I'm hoping that the blip will be the last 60, 70 years when we look at these coatings that we have been using. Because the most sustainable coating is the one that you do not have to remove. You don't have to scrape it back. You don't have to sand it back. Usually, certainly in terms of linseed paint, a fresh coat of some boiled linseed oil to reconstitute that pigment matrix is more than enough. So, yeah, the alternative is not to reimagining the current petrochemical paints. The future is not this is not the alternative is not futuristic, is what I like to say, but it's looking back at what used to work for all these years. We don't need to use acrylics or vinyl or plastic binders because we all aware of the built-in obsolescence of film forming plastic coatings. Because the whole cycle is that you paint, it fails, then you have to get a contractor out to strip everything again, sand it all down, replace it. And this is what again, part of the educational point is that the linseed oil-based maintenance is one to protect and to maintain. So you set up the system once and that's it. So how can we change the conversation? So part of I'm a member of, like, as Larry introduced himself, part of the ASBP Paints and Finishes group, where we've got a great selection of a team that look at all kinds of natural paints and coatings. And I also think it's really important to look at our phrasing. How do we put a framework in place for the right wording? So we are a member of the Anti-Greenwash Charter, and it really helps with making sure that we come up with a really good framework to place paint in the correct light. And then there are, programs like Nature Plus, Cradle to Cradle, that can really help with all of this as well. And so one of the things that we've now worked really hard on is we've come up with an ESG impact calculator. So you can put the square footage in of the area that you're painting, and then you can see how it compares to conventional paint in terms of plastic binder avoided, the production of the CO2 avoided, and VOC reduction, because those three are kind of the trifecta, I think, to go together. Knowledge and data is power, and this is what we try to get across to people. And this is not, historic paints are not just something for historic buildings and for museums. It works in extreme climates. You see, this is the research center in Antarctica. Big public buildings and infrastructure buildings as well. I can. This one speaks for itself. I'll skip this one. But so what I want to leave you with is essentially is ask the question: if we were to make paint now again from scratch, would we start off with making it as a plastic paint, or basically go with something natural materials, ingredients, locally manufactured? And this is a really easy win in terms of specifications. We can swap this tomorrow if we wanted to. And that's kind of it. So I'm going to stop there because I think I'm probably at the 10 minutes.
Yeah,
maybe
you're
over.
Slightly over, but I'll let
Right,
you off.
sorry.
No, it's fine. I'll let you off. Thank you for that, Michiel, and thank you. Yeah, you're right. You don't really put plastics and paint in the same box, do you, when you think about it? And it's interesting, isn't it, when you said, new synthetic paint was developed from a need at that point to deal with loads of waste, which was probably a good thing at the time, we thought, and we don't. But then, you've got all these unintended consequences from doing that, haven't you? But yes, please do add your questions for Michiel in the Q&A. Sure there will be some. Right, last but not least, I'm going to introduce my colleague Larry. He's just going to do a few minutes on the publication that we've been working on. I would do a drum roll, but haven't got any drumsticks for that. But yes, so Larry, please talk about our launch of our plastics guidance.
Oh, thanks, Katherine. Can you see my screen?
Yep, all good.
Oh, perfect. So I'm only going to take a couple of minutes, as I'm sure we are keen to get to the Q&A, and I see there's some questions in there. And I just thought I'd share, kind of demo what we've done slightly. So we've just today launched a report called Plastics in Construction: Health Risks, Evidence and Alternatives. It's developed by the Reducing Plastics in Construction group, who also support this webinar today. And it's exploring a growing body of evidence on the impacts of plastics in buildings on human health, and highlighting lower plastic and plastic-free alternatives. I'm kind of saying this with the position of ASBP on plastics, so we're not kind of saying all plastics is bad, and certainly it has a space, but we're looking at plastic reduction where possible, and then elimination where it's possible as well. So obviously there are some plastic products that are doing a great job, and maybe there aren't any suitable alternatives, but certainly there is an overuse of plastics, and I think that's been clear from the presentations today. The report is basically bringing together academic research and industry evidence on how exposure to certain plastics, additives and microplastics found in some construction products can affect occupants. So this is an occupant kind of based report. So there are other risks in construction, but this is kind of in your home, in your office space, and is looking at the key health themes. So it's looking at, we've got a little bit of indoor air quality, but there's specific health outcomes like respiratory health, cognitive and neurological impacts, endocrine disruption, immune health, and skin-related conditions too. And we've kind of put this together with product tables which outline the plastic content of certain products, how you get exposed to the plastic in those products, and alternative material options. There is lots of research around plastics and health, but less specifically related to building products. And what we've tried to do is find those specific pieces of academic research that are product focused and pull them into this report. And the idea is then to make that information accessible and practical.
Larry, sorry to interrupt. I can just see the top of the screen. I'm not sure if you're scrolled.
That's why I'm going to give a demo in just a sec.
Okay, sorry, my fault.
That's all right. Where was I? The idea is to be accessible and practical to the industry and kind of a high level piece. So we've done kind of the hard work in looking at some of the academic research and looking at those academic papers. And then it's all linked through to those pieces of research as well as other useful resources. So I'm just going to show you how it looks. So here we have, it's quite a simple thing and it's interactive. So you can actually look at the different things we've talked about. So there's a bit on methodology and indoor air quality, but then you can actually skip through to different health outcomes. So you can look at immune health and it'll skip down the page and you'll be able to look at immune health outcomes. A little bit about those and a piece of research, one or two pieces of research attached to that, and then a table of materials and products, which like I mentioned, includes what it is, the chemical, plastic and chemical content, the release pathway, and then some alternatives as well, which is where the ASBP comes in, I suppose, in having some of the bank of this. And you've got people like Brouns Co who are creating some of these products. There were some key findings involved in this. So there are quite a few chemical additives in products associated with health risks. The exposures can be through inhalation of airborne particles, ingestion of dust, and direct skin contact. The evidence links exposures to all sorts of different conditions. Sian talked a lot earlier about babies, and infants and children are particularly vulnerable due to higher relative exposure and increased biological sensitivity during development. So yes, this is what Sian talked about earlier. And I really think that her presentation today was kind of insightful to this work as well. But there is some good news. There are some lower plastic and plastic-free alternatives for many products. And at the bottom of this, there is a bunch of further reading as well, which is super useful in some of these reports, for example, by Perkins and Will, the Endocrine Society, and there are others are really good and worth a read. So this is kind of giving that high level information but if you've kind of got that want to go and look a bit further and do a bit in depth, that's there for you as well. So yeah, that's just been released today, and hopefully one of my colleagues has put the link in the chat while I've been probably talking for too long. But I'm gonna leave it there, and what we'll do, we'll send out the link with a follow-up to this as well with the YouTube recording. But back to you, Katherine.
Great, thank you, Larry. That's that's part of our plastics group work, and it's free. There's no charge to look at any of that. We want to make it available as much as we can. And I guess over the next few months, you'll see a bit more sort of publicity of what we've done, so we can get the message out there. Right, could I invite all the speakers to put their camera on, if that would be possible? We've got 10 minutes for questions. There's a few in the Q&A, and I may take the liberty of asking a few as well. And Simon, my colleague who organised this webinar, he may also want to ask a few. He very much likes the What's it called? The Plastic Detox, the Netflix. He's trying to get us all to watch it. I still haven't got round to watching
Yeah.
it. Anyway.
Compulsory viewing for everybody.
Yes.
Sack 'em off.
Yes. He should be on commission.
I know.
Right, I'm going to just ask a few questions. Some of them are quite sort of direct to speakers, others are a bit more general. First, couple for you, Michiel, is do you have EPDs? So people who don't know what EPDs are, they're environmental product declarations, and they basically show the environmental performance of your product through a life cycle assessment approach. And then a couple of others related to that. Maybe Charlotte can come in as well in terms of, is there scalability for natural paints to replace modern paints? Question. And are there natural alternatives for high energy water environments? So maybe Michiel and Charlotte can come in on them. Thank you.
Sure, yeah. I'll no, well, to begin with, we do not have EPDs at the moment. We are working with Nature Plus now on, well, very recently, to get this all organized. And one of the main reasons is because I've been trying to work out a way that we don't just fall into this typical I've got to be slightly careful, but that potentially the accreditation, world of accreditation can become an industry in its own right. And I want to make sure that the EPDs actually are worth the paper they're written on. And so this is one of the things that why I've been hesitant so far. But I do think in Nature Plus, we probably have found a partner that can probably help us in the way that I think is justifiable as well. I want to be able to explain everything to any questions that we get from the industry and the market. The second question was, sustainability for scale. Yes, absolutely, because we are not looking at having an industry or a business model that is just built on manufacturing more and more and more. The whole idea is to actually get to a point where you set up, for instance, a linseed oil paint system in three or four coats. Then your maintenance is just wiping it with some linseed oil. This isn't about going back every 5-6 years, scraping everything off, removing everything, and then going through that whole cycle. I think that's one of the things that we need to break. Probably the other stuff's probably Charlotte is probably better positioned to answer.
I mean, Michiel is probably more of an expert, like working in the field. But I will say though, I think it's interesting to anyway look at your product from a life cycle assessment perspective, because when replacing polymers with natural ingredients, natural resources, you also obviously want to make sure that you're not transferring impact somewhere else. And that's generally speaking for any kind of product assessment, right? And also what Michiel mentioned is very valid, to look at your system and what you're building and how you can ensure that your materials will last, that you elongate product lifetime, and also why not just consider not painting? That's also a design choice, and that's one to consider for sure.
Yeah, you can be very lazy like me and just not paint enough and leave it on for years. That's what happens to me. There's two sort of questions here interlinked, I guess. One for Ben in terms of, does the guide have alternative materials or suggestions for high risk plastics? And then another one as well, which is probably anyone wants to answer this one, is someone has a client who wants to avoid using plastic in their retrofit projects. Is there a database that architects can use? I know we've looked at sort of our EPD database. We've done some case studies but it'd be good to get your opinions on that. So maybe Ben, and then I'll open that up.
Yeah, so I guess I can kind of answer both questions. So we do have a table, a couple of tables within the guidance itself that talks about and sections that talk about alternative products, especially for the main ones that I showed in those bullet points where they had more information on. But we also provide alternative products examples in the tables below for the lesser known products. We also, as we know, it's not a be all and end all of, because sometimes those alternative products might not have the same performance. They, as Charlotte just said, they might not be as sustainable as even using plastics in the first place. So there's also, we provide a link to this guidance or website called Habitable, which is based in the US, and they also go through and provide all these different options for the different products that you can do in construction or for buildings, and kind of rank all the different options that you can have based not just on plastics or microplastics, but also a wide variety of contaminants that might be contained within those materials. So we also direct them there, and you can. I think what you have to do is create an account on their website, and you can go and check that out yourself. It's free. So
yeah, we've looked at that as well. It's a great resource, isn't it? Maybe one for Sian here. This is a good, I've never thought of this really. Should we be looking at using more bioplastics, or is there any difference between a bioplastic and a fossil fuel when it comes to their health impact?
It really depends what that bioplastic is comprised of, because as everyone will know, it's a catch-all bucket for bioplastics, and some of them have perhaps a better beginning of life, being derived from plant stocks. But once they're made into a plastic, they are bioidentical to a fossil fuel plastic, and they have the same never-ending end of life and also contain the same chemicals. And then there are bioplastics deemed plastic by the EU definition of plastic that we think are safe plastics, that are, the direction of travel. And if you look at something like Vivamere from Shellworks, which is PHA derived, a really smart form of PHA, that does disintegrate back into nature in an entirely healthy way, then there's not one category of bioplastics that you could say good or bad. Everybody thought the PLA was going to be the answer, and it's clearly not.
Yeah. We've put everything together, and it's more complicated than that, isn't it? I've got a quick question because I heard a little bit of different opinion in terms of research, really. And is there enough known about? I guess I'm taking the construction angle and doing our paper with Larry. We did struggle to make a sort of a connection sometimes between product and health impact. I guess. Do we know enough? Do we need a sort of a national research strategy almost where we can put all the gaps together? Don't know if anyone's got any thoughts on that
Can I
quickly.
jump in very briefly on that and then hand over to the rest of the great panel? We will always need more research. So that's a given, but we know enough. And we
Okay.
definitely know enough when it comes to our most vulnerable young. So this is about prevention now. And it's maddening that the scientists have been ringing this alarm bell for decades. So when you see how much, the plethora of research, you can go to plasticfreebabies.world. We've done an entire synthesis of the decades of research just on the impact on babies, from babies' products, from formula, all of those things. There is less around microplastics. But what we've got to remember, as I said in my presentation, when you're inhaling micro and nanoplastics, when you're breathing them in, when you're drinking it in your water, your glass of beer, whatever, then these are the carriers of the chemicals. So these are little poison pills that are now prevalent everywhere in our bodies. I don't know how much more evidence we need than this, the cause and effect of the decrease. Let's talk about the decrease in infertility for men. And the increase since the 70s of plastic being the default for everything, and the fact that it is made using endocrine disrupting chemicals.
Yep. Yeah, I think I'm going to have to wrap it up there. Sorry, other people didn't get to comment on that question. Thank you ever so much for all our speakers. I've really enjoyed it. I think it's been really thought-provoking. It's made me think about a few things, definitely. There's lots of information provided, lots of guidance, links, other stuff, campaigns that are going on. Please do take the time to look. This is such an important area. As I said before, we will share this on YouTube. We'll do a bit of marketing around it. Please do share widely. The more people that can hear this, the better. There is a feedback form, I think Larry's put in the chat. We would work with, please do feedback. It helps us design our webinars in the future. Do please keep a lookout on our website for our future events. And we'll obviously link to all the good stuff that's going on. I've just been chewing my plastic top pen, so that's like. Thanks all, and have a lovely day. And let's hope we're all in a really good mood at about, what, 10 o'clock?
Come on, England!
Thanks, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much,
Thanks.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank
Thanks
you,
all.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.